Nigerian youths recognize that they have an opportunity to be at the table, and this is their opportunity. But the second question from Voice of Nigeria then will center around the work we do at the Ministry of Education. Of the social ministries that there are, education is at the core of the social, because it deals with human development. So with nearly 22 million Nigerians in school, at some point of school, the Ministry of Education covers a wide gamut. The bulk of these are the primary level, with 135,000 primary schools in Nigeria and 28,000 secondary schools across the country. Nigeria is one of the largest and geospatially challenged educational entities around West Africa. So our work has centered around getting as many of them into the school system. Before we came, there were nearly 13 million Nigerians out of school. And before I joined the ministry, the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, had, with the president, held what was called a ministerial program, over which we distilled the ministerial action plan. In the wisdom of Mr. President, there was need to invite and bring somebody to make those decisions run. So in the 33 months that I've been at the ministry, my job essentially had been to drive that engagement so that the ministerial action plan will be achieved. And I'm happy to report that in the ministerial assessment that had been done almost on all the scores, World Bank has said that we've done more than any previous government in bringing out-of-school children into school. We have increased by a large percentage the amount of money that UBEC gets to the states. This government has, through UBEC, made sure that schools and their intake have been expanded. So, while we still have the challenge, while that challenge still exists, because even if one child is out of school, it is still one child too many. We have made substantial progress. We have reduced this number by nearly 5 million in the course of 3 years. So we're proud that we are able to bring them on. Some of the achievements we made were challenged by COVID, because having brought everybody into school, we found ourselves faced with a situation where we had to shut down the schools that we had brought people. And for nearly 8 months, we had our children in school. So it's been our duty since then to re-engage parents and have them bring back children to school. The second arm of your question deals with the tertiary end of our engagement. In the school system, we have about 2.6 million Nigerian undergraduates in the nearly 200 universities across Nigeria. The federal government owns less than 50 of these universities. The state governments own nearly 50 of them as well. Whereas private individuals and private organizations, faith-based organizations, own another 100 plus. The only part where children are not in school at the moment are the ones that belong to the federal government. So there is no need for any other university to be at home. The engagement with ASUU has been a long-drawn one, based on the 2009 agreement that was signed before we came into government. It is our duty as government to give life to those agreements, which ASUU rightly seeks to make sure that the universities that the federal government owns are properly funded. Federal government's funding is very limited. And because of the additional challenges of security, they've had to repeatedly borrow money to finance government. This same borrowing is not available to build social infrastructure. It is only available to build infrastructure that government can get returns from, railways, all those kind of things. To borrow and pay people is not normally what World Bank or other institutions borrow money for. However, federal government has continued to contain this and pay the salaries that are due. The crux of some of the items that are in issue include the use of IPs instead of UTAs. Now, both of them are payment platforms. One developed by ASUU, another developed by entities that government had already purchased from in 2013. And they believe that this is not very well suited for their own activities. Government, however, is the only person who pays. And therefore, it is impractical and incongruous to continuously expect that somebody who is paid a salary continues to dictate to the person who pays him, this is how you must pay me. And this is where this anomaly is. We have pleaded with ASUU that if there are any areas where your salary or any their shortfalls, kindly address them within the ambit of IPs, because that's what government has for now. We are not yet at the point where government takes a decision to convert to a different application. Since you've been earning salaries on these IPs, continue to earn the IPs while our children are in school. Why they have chosen to go on strike over this is something that neither you or I can explain. The second part of their complaint deals with end allowances. End allowances, as the name implies, refers to what you have earned as an allowance over and above your salaries. That computation is an ongoing computation, and it needs to vary with time. Again, my plea to ASUU has always been, there is nothing ASUU is saying that is not good to do. Everything that is good to do can be done. You do not need to be on strike in order to get universities built. You don't need to be on strike to get your salaries paid. You don't need to be on strike to get your allowances paid. None of this is missing. This is a continuum. And the only child, the only person that loses is the Nigerian child, because when ASUU finishes this strike and returns, and they find out that they've not been paid for the period they are not on strike, they will go on another strike, demanding for the pay of that period when they were on that strike, during which they need to now collect the money of that one. Then we will pay them. When we pay, because this is a repeated process. This has happened continuously since 1992. This is not peculiar to this administration at all. This is an ongoing scheme. So the arm of your question, which I would then address, is what do I think, based on this experience, that can happen? We have a couple of suggestions before the ministry, and this is something that we have advanced to government. We are working on a couple of prints. Truly speaking, the universities are autonomous. We need to go the step forward and give them financial autonomy so that ASUU is no longer an employee of the federal government. And as you know, ASUU and members are employees of the federal government. They are not employees of the Federal Ministry of Education. We do not hire teachers. We do not hire lecturers. We do not fire them. Anybody you cannot hire or fire is not your employee. So anybody who is in doubt as to whether Federal Ministry of Education and ASUU has any issues should recognize that we, in a contractual relationship, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry and ASUU do not have a contractual relationship. They are in a contractual relationship with the federal government of Nigeria. Their salaries are paid from the IP's headquarters at the Accountant General's office. So whatever they resolve has to be resolved at that level. The Ministry of Education remains their own founding ministry, with which they interact to sort policy guidelines and make sure that Nigeria content is delivered. We are doing that, and we are engaging them. We believe that as we progress as a nation, we must decouple ourselves from this continuous unionization of our national interests, so that these schools, especially the ones owned by the federal government, those who are owned by state government, have no need to be on strike. Those who are owned by private individuals have no need to be on strike, because the idea that federal government needs to fund or pay anybody, whether it's allowances or needs assessment or end allowances or IPs or IP, only applies to those who are in federal government employee in federal government institutions. So really, the truth is that these federal government institutions actually, as small as the number are, admit more students than all the other 150 universities put together. So really, the impact is heavy on our children. So what we have done as a country is to appeal to ASUU. Our children have been home for nearly 3 months. There is nothing that ASUU wants that we have not agreed to. We would like them to return to classes so that students can go back to class. As the nation ends, we pay them. As the nation makes money, they will get money. What we don't want is for our children to miss the opportunity of their own time because there is a time frame within which children must grow. The child cannot wait. It is important that ASUU returns to class. Optimism. I thank you all.